Good evening. My name is Paul Gordon Chandler, and I serve as the Bishop of the Episcopal Church in Wyoming. And on behalf of the Episcopal Church in Wyoming and its I don't live in Jackson, but it sounds like I've got a few fans, so that's kind. But on behalf of the Episcopal Church in Wyoming and its Art Spirit Initiative, I want to warmly welcome you to this evening's event, an evening with Joy Harjo. This whole event this evening is an associated program to the art exhibition that's in the gallery, which is titled Grounded, Restoring Our World Through a Sacred Harmony with the Earth and Each Other. And I've got to say right from the outset, I want to share how grateful we are for the partnership with the Wyoming Humanities Council. And it has been a special delight to work with Emmy DeGrappa, who I believe is here somewhere, and in realizing the exhibition here and its various programming that has resulted around it. We're also very grateful for the partnership of the St. John's Episcopal Church in Jackson here, and the Eco Theo Collective, which you'll hear a little bit about in a moment. I think you would agree with me that our world is calling for restoration, for a realignment of what might be called a sacred harmony, of establishing a new balance between ourselves and the earth and with all of life upon it. There's no question that our planet is facing a multifaceted crisis, and foundational to any solution is the critical need to have a healthier relationship with everything on the earth. Hence, it's essential that we acknowledge and honor our intricate connection to the earth as our sustainer, to the wisdom of our ancestors, and to humanity's need of each other. And we have a tremendous amount to learn from the indigenous cultures of our Native American sisters and brothers who can teach us about what it means to maintain this sacred balance. For they see everything on the earth as living in relationship. Hence, they understand today's environmental and humanitarian crises as affecting everyone and everything, geologically, environmentally, physically, psychologically, and even spiritually. Their spiritual wisdom is therefore essential to developing a sacred harmony between all peoples and the earth. I'm reminded of the profound words of Black Elk, the Oglala Lakota holy man. Let every step you take upon the earth be a prayer. The Holy Land is everywhere. Great Spirit, all things belong to you, the two-legged, the four-legged, the wings of the air, and all green things that live. You have set the powers of the four corners to cross each other, and where they cross, that place is holy. Day in and day out, forever, you are the life of things. And this is what these creative expressions in the Grounded exhibition that is currently showcased there in the gallery is all about. Nurturing that sacred connection towards a new groundedness, if you will, leading to more intentional and responsible living. The Grounded exhibition brings together 15 award-winning contemporary artists from 8 indigenous American tribes, traditionally based in and around the Great Plains region. And through their artwork, they are seeking to inspire our imaginations about our need to be grounded in our relationship with all of creation, the earth and its wildlife, each other, as well as ourselves. The creative work of this inspiring group of contemporary artists serves as a visual representation of the worldview and wisdom and learnings of their forebears, and to share their culture and heritage and sacred traditions, all with the objective of helping us imagine how we should live in order to heal our world. The exhibition was showcased first in Lander, and then in Casper and Cheyenne, now in Jackson. It will go on to Worland, and then Rock Springs. Then it will visit a few other venues in the United States, including our capital, Washington, D.C. Then it will go on to the United Kingdom, and it will end in the Middle East. allowing those outside of the United States to learn from our Native American sisters and brothers. I want to highlight that there's a catalog out there of the exhibition, a 73-page catalog that has all the artwork in it, as well as all the artist statements, and that's available near the bar out there. And I also want to say that all the artwork is for sale, with 100% of it going to the artist of the proceeds, and the price lists are up there, posted as well. The exhibition also serves as a catalyst for events and programs to be developed at each venue to stimulate discussion, dialogue, and education around the exhibition's theme toward promoting further understanding and certainly widening the engagement with the artwork. And this is the context of this evening's presentation. And before making a couple of introductions, I close with a thought from our special guest this evening, Joy Harjo, words I think that are very apropos at this time. Joy writes, "Remember the plants, trees, animal life, who all have their families and their histories too. Talk to them, listen to them. They are alive poems. And remember that you are all people then, and all people are you. There is no separation. We are all from the same place. And as long as there is respect and acknowledgement of connections, things continue working. When that stops, we all die." It's a special privilege for us to be here at the Center for the Arts, and I am deeply grateful to Willie Brooks and Una Doherty for their assistance with the whole Grounded exhibition and the various events. And I'd like to invite the Executive Director for the Center for the Arts, Marty Camino, to offer a few welcoming words. Marty.
Good evening, everyone. As you heard, my name is Marty Camino, and I'm the Executive Director here at the Center for the Arts. It is my pleasure, on behalf of our Board of Directors and our entire staff, to welcome you to the Center Theater. I want to start with a few thank yous of my own, and specifically for Bishop Paul Gordon Chandler, the St. John's Church and the Episcopal Church of Wyoming, the Art Spirit Initiative, and Caravan. Also, a big thank you to Emmy DeGrappa, Sean Reese, and Wyoming Humanities, and then to the Ward Hotel for sponsoring tonight's event. This partnership exemplifies the spirit and mission of our organization. The center exists to provide a dedicated campus for cultural programming and events that are rooted in collaboration. Whether it is the exhibit that you heard Paul Gordon speaking about, or tonight's event with Joy Harjo, it is our honor and pleasure to connect with the many artists, communities, host venues, and partners who make this possible. I also want to take a moment to thank the members of my staff who have made this possible, including Patrick Millard, Pearson Beasley, Willie Brooks, and Una Doherty. And finally, as your nonprofit community art center, our work is made possible through the generous support of the community. And I want to thank the many donors, sponsors, and patrons who support our organization. Thank you again for joining us this evening.
Thanks, Marty. To introduce our special guest this evening, it seemed most apropos for a poet to introduce a poet. The Reverend Dr. Travis Helms is an Episcopal priest serving as an associate rector here at St. John's Church here in Jackson, the Episcopal Church. He's one of the executive directors of the Eco Theo Collective, a nonprofit that is hosting the Wonder Festival here in Jackson this weekend, and I have a feeling he'll share a little bit about that. Travis is an award-winning poet, and the founder and director of the Logos Poetry Collective, a liturgically inflected poetry initiative that leads participants into a deeper dimension of spirituality. He speaks widely on the intersection between poetry, spirituality, and the imagination. And most importantly, he's the only person I know in Wyoming who has visited some of the desert oases in the Sahara Desert where I grew up. So I have a special affinity to Travis. Would you please welcome with me Reverend Travis Helms.
Hey y'all, how's it going? We're almost to Joy. Here we go. Though I was reluctant to be born, I was attracted by the music. I had plans. I was entrusted with carrying voices, songs, and stories to grow and release into the world, to be of assistance and inspiration. These were my responsibility. I am not special. It is this way for everyone. We each have our own individual soul story to tend. These words which center one of the innumerable instances of luminous lyric witness in Joy Harjo's acclaimed 2012 memoir, Crazy Brave, portray the author in a moment of revelation, beholding her own instance of birth, pondering her threshold passage from the realm of the ancestors into what she calls the story field of this life, our wondrous and wounded world. In depicting her own entrance into, quote, the weave of the story matrix, Harjo's knowing transcends and collapses mundane differences within time and space to hymn new possibilities of seeing, of more freely being. Over and again in her poems and prose, Harjo retrieves a way of imagining the world to riff on an idea from the philosopher Charles Taylor as not just a secularized universe to be analyzed, dissected, and exploited, but as a re-enchanted cosmos, a word that originally meant beauty, in order that we might sing and summon new futures into our radiant and painful present. Born in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and a member of the Muscogee Nation, Joy Harjo is the author of 9 books of poetry, 2 memoirs, several plays and children's books, editor of 2 acclaimed volumes of Native American poetry, and creator of 7 albums of music. In 2019, Harjo was appointed the 23rd United States Poet Laureate, the first Native American to hold the post, in which she served until 2022. The winner of numerous awards, she is a chancellor of the Academy of American Poets, Board of Directors Chair of the Native Arts and Cultures Foundation, and, this is so cool, Artist in Residence for the Bob Dylan Center in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Yeah, Bob. I believe in the sun, Harjo writes in one poem. In the tangle of human failures, of fear, greed, and forgetfulness, the sun gives me clarity. The saving, solving wisdom that Harjo's music making offers is that by learning to talk with the sun, to dwell within this world more fully, in all its heaving heaviness and mess, its endless elegance, its light and loveliness, we can learn to see one another and all the beings who move through it more clearly, so that we might love more truly what and whom we see and live that love as action. How blessed we are to be present to the brave, embracing invitation of a poet, thinker, teacher, healer, who so incandescently incarnates ways in which we might remember, repair, and re-ligament the connections we have severed with one another and with the more than human world, as we welcome to the Grounded exhibition and the 2023 Wonder Festival, Joy Harjo.
Thank you so much. It's kind of been a love fest here. It's good to be here. It's been years. I can't remember. I was here probably 30 or 40 years ago for a poetry event. It's been a long time. I'm still alive. No, you get to a certain age and you start losing all of your teachers and your mentors, but some of them you can still find. You know, they still appear. They certainly appear in their words and in memories. And so I'm very happy to be part of this event. I like to start off with a song to honor those who take care of the earth. It's kind of my version of a land acknowledgement, to acknowledge the original keepers of this place. And every area has original keepers, and some of them, you don't know who they are, you don't know, they don't tell you their names, you won't see them out there. But they literally keep altars of the earth. And they do it with direct care, with songs, with poetry, and stories. So I want to acknowledge them and acknowledge that those who continue to keep the earth and this incredible place. Paul Gordon was talking when he was driving us from the airport, saying that, reminding me, because I'd heard these Tetons were like some of the youngest mountains. And they're amazing. They're one of my favorite groups of mountains in the world. And I kept thinking of them as adolescents and what kind of mess they could, they are enacting, or the energy they enact in the area and on the town. But they're really beautiful. I think they're some of the most beautiful mountains. So I will play a song to honor them and the keepers. This next piece is it's called "Rabbit is Up to Tricks." I should say Henje Stongo. I'm Joy Harjo Chiochifkeros. Joy means joyful, of course, and Harjo is Hajo, and it means so brave you're crazy. So it's something good to live up to. So joyfully brave you're crazy, or so joyful you're bravely crazy. There's a lot of ways you can take that. It's actually a warrior name, and there are a lot of Harjos, and like Sterling Harjo, and no, we're not related. No, I am not his mother, etc. But I've known him for years, and so on. There are many of us. And I'm a member of the Muscogee Creek Nation, Ojiabova, or Hickory Ground Ceremonial Ground. And I live in the Muscogee Creek Nation Reservation in what is now known as Oklahoma. And with our people, the trickster out here in the West, I think the trickster figure is often coyote or coyote. And where we come from, it's rabbit or chofi. And tricksters are incredible mirrors, like magnified mirrors of human behavior. They show us how we act when we think, we're not always at our best. And so this is my version of a Muscogee Creek trickster tale, but it's contemporary. And what's interesting, what I have found is a lot of poetry or a lot of writing is somewhat prophetic. And, in that I say that sometimes the trickster winds up, usually there are tricksters near the seat of power to remind those in power that the power does not belong to them. It's meant to be shared. But in strange times, the trickster can wind up sitting in the seat of power. We've seen a lot of that happening around the world lately. It's called Rabbit is Up to Tricks. And I need to find it here. I know it by heart. And somewhere. Okay. I will start the music and then it will appear. In a world long before this one, there was enough for everyone until somebody got out of line. We heard it was Rabbit, fooling around with clay in the wind. Everybody was tired of his tricks and no one would play with him, and he was lonely in this world. So Rabbit thought to make a person, and when he blew into the mouth of that crude figure to see what would happen, the clay man stood up. Rabbit showed the clay man how to steal a chicken. The clay man obeyed. Then he showed him how to steal corn. The clay man obeyed. Then he showed him how to steal someone else's wife, and that clay man obeyed. Rabbit felt important and powerful, and clay man felt important and powerful, and once that clay man started, he could not stop. Once he took that chicken, he wanted all the chickens. Once he took that corn, he wanted all the corn, and once he took that wife, well, he wanted all the wives. He was insatiable. Then he had a taste of gold. He wanted all the gold. Soon it was land or anything else he saw. His wanting only made him want more. Soon it was countries. Then it was trade. The wanting infected the earth. We lost track of the purpose and meaning for life. We began to forget our songs, our stories. We could no longer see or hear our ancestors or talk to each other across the kitchen table. Forests were being mowed down all over the world, and Rabbit had no place left to play. Rabbit's trick had backfired. Rabbit tried to call that clay man back, but when the clay man wouldn't listen, Rabbit realized he made a clay man with no ears. So, yeah, this exhibit is pretty cool. It's good to see people, it's good to see these kinds of images. I was thinking about that a lot today, about images of natives and how we're seen, like saxophone. I started playing saxophone when I was almost 40, and I usually play alto, but I started out on tenor. And I found out after I started from my uncle, John Jacobs. He said, well, we might have your grandmother's saxophone around here. And my grandmother, Naomi Harjo, played saxophone in Indian Territory. And I didn't know that. And I always think, well, put that in your cache of images of Native women. But I was in one of these shops today, and it was a really nice guy has it. It's a lot of Native stuff, and it's not hokey or fake. And there was a woman from Europe somewhere, and he was telling her a story about a woman who had done a lot of the art. And I hear her, she said, well, she doesn't look Native at all. And I didn't say anything. Maybe she's here in the audience. And that got me, I thought, what does Native look like? We're all different. And yet there are these images. And I'm thinking, it reminds me, I have a granddaughter, Desiree Chi. She's half Navajo. A lot of Koreans have that last name too, I noticed. But I have great-grandchildren through her now, but when she was about 4, we were walking around Santa Fe, which is a lot like walking around Jackson Hole here. And we came to a shop, and there was a big headdress there. And this little girl is Navajo, Acoma, Muscogee Creek. And she says, look, Nana, Indians. So think about that. But a little bit of context, too, for the exhibit, I went to school with Don Montolo, who's one of the artists, wonderful artists, and we were part of one of the first all-Native drama and dance troupes. And he was a wonderful artist there. So I was going to read a little from Catching the Light about it gives a little bit of context of being an artist, a Native artist, and at a time when there was a big shift in Native arts and images in the late 60s. And I went to the, I'll just read it. I was born in Oklahoma, in Tulsa, and when I was 16, went to Indian school for high school. And it was an art school. You had to apply to get in, and it was all kinds of arts. But this was a school Don Montolo went to. It was a BIA school then, and it is now a full-blown Native Arts College. 1967 was quite a year. My origin story of writing poetry would begin here after I arrived in Santa Fe at the Institute of American Indian Arts, IAIA, which was then a Bureau of Indian Arts residential high school with a 2-year postgraduate program. We were Native students from all over, tribal nations all over throughout what is now called the United States, all of us there because of a demonstrated proficiency in arts. That fall, when I began at IAIA, there were race riots across the country. The Vietnam War was blazing. Jimi Hendrix's first album, Are You Experienced, was released. Jim Morrison and the Doors followed with Light My Fire, and Thurgood Marshall was sworn in as the first black justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. The free love explosion was traveling from Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco all over the country, including Santa Fe's Canyon Road. Native rights movements were stirring in the wake of the civil rights movement, and Alcatraz would soon be occupied. I arrived at the main dorm on the Cerrillos Road campus of IAIA with my Middle Army footlocker, carrying everything I owned from Tulsa. When I walked up that tall, wide porch and signed in, I did not look back. In the months before, I had seriously considered running away. I needed out of the abuse of the situation at home, but I was underage and had no credibility as a young Native woman. Anyway, I'm going to skip around. I found refuge in drawing and in music. I searched for a path to the doorway offered by artistic practice. Art was natural to me, a constant. I told my mother I wanted to go to Indian school, and at the Indian Agency in Muscogee, I was slated to attend Chilocco Indian School until my mother mentioned that I was an artist. The agent handed her a brochure of a new arts program at IAIA. I clutched that brochure like a life preserver, made my application with drawings, and was accepted. With that enrollment, I felt a kind of grace appear, an interception, an affirmation of a path toward a future. In the 1960s, and I'm skipping, in the 1960s, the Cherokee artist Lloyd Keevan had a vision of fostering the talent of young Native artists and developing the field of indigenous arts. In 1963, Kiva and his team were instrumental in opening IAIA, and so began a watershed age of accomplishment and transformation when Native arts and artists would achieve national and world context and recognition. What I found there was a refuge, more than that, a family made up of other Native students from all over the country and our arts teachers, all of us on the artist path together. In that incarnation of IAIA, we still had lined up against the wall in one of my classrooms, and I later taught in that classroom, stoves that had been used just a few years earlier to teach female students how to cook and clean for in-town residents. And out back, a dairy barn structure for teaching male students how to farm. When it was time for inoculations, half the student body would run to escape behind those buildings. Every weekend was a challenge for all of us to make it through the rough terrain of historical trauma. Students went missing, overdosed, or broke down. We'd all help each other not get caught. And then I write about a little scenario I'm not going to read here. The teachers of academics were either the best or most dedicated because they loved natives and had pride in their work, or they were there because they couldn't be hired anywhere else. We had one teacher who spent most of the semester addressing nudity in ancient Egypt. Our arts teachers were the finest, that was the teachers of academics. Our arts teachers were the finest available, both native and non-native. We learned under the Apache sculptor Alan Hauser, painting and drawing under Fritz Schelder, Mission Indian, studied a traditional pottery with Ottilie Lolema Hopi and graphic arts with Seymour Tubis, learned traditional techniques with Josephine Myers Wapp, Comanche, and theater with Roland Meinholz. Louis Ballard was Quapaw Cherokee from Oklahoma and a renowned composer of classical music at IAIA. He composed for Maria Tallchief, among others, and was the first to weave traditional tribal music with European classical styles. He was assigned as my advisor, and he remained my advisor throughout my life. Though we were young, we had a sense of destiny among ourselves. Our ancestors had imagined us with pride, and we felt an urgency to cultivate and celebrate those cultural gifts. Each of us had found challenge, inspiration, and redemption in practicing our arts as individuals, as members of clans, tribal bands, and nations. Yet, even as our eyes shone with possibility, we arrived there dragging loss, trauma, and grief from all corners of a history that had been enacted against us in the name of manifest destiny. The phrase historical trauma hadn't emerged in the vernacular then, but we were direct evidence of it. Many of us were becoming aware that we had come into a time ripe for collective national change of identity and personhood. We were that generation in the late 60s that began to change everything as we questioned who we were as young Native artists, as tribal members with roots in classical tribal thought and culture who were being inspired by what was happening in the large field of American and world cultures. We were the generation that changed the face of American Indian art as we challenged stereotypes and tropes that prophesized our extinction. You can still see those, the warrior bent over his horse traveling west, west meaning the end. We found groundbreaking ways to make fresh paths over our ancient trails of concept design and architecture. What I learned as a student at IAIA in the late 60s became central to my consequent journey as a Muscogee poet, writer, playwright, musician, and teacher. We were inspired and directed to make our original art, born of major traditions and arts and cultures, even as we were venturing out for fresh ideas and images. We were wounded, but it was in the wounding that we would find our strength. As we practice our arts, we realized that we had a hand in revising the story of who we are as indigenous nations, who we were, and who we were becoming. We would come to learn that our indigenous arts and lifeways are crucial to a healthy and dynamic American story. There is no America without us, and our arts, the arts of all our citizens, show the way to a meaningful future. I think given that, I'm going to play An American Sunrise. This poem came from, it's part of a forum, I've been blanking out, I'll think of it, Terrence Hayes invented, based on Gwendolyn Brooks' poems. And in it, you take one of her poems or a line, and the end lines of the poem, you make the poem, the end word of each line of your poem comes from that poem. And so I wrote An American Sunrise, which has disappeared here. Just a minute, what's going on here? There we go. An American Sunrise. And later I went to the University of New Mexico. I didn't go directly. From IAIA, I went over into theater because my best friend was taking theater. And I said I would never get on a stage, which tells you the power of the word never. There will never be peace in this world. And so I did wind up going to the University of New Mexico, but this was after we had one of the first all-native drama and dance troupes, went on tour, and I went home pregnant one year and became a teenage mother, living on squirrels and commodity cheese, etc. And then, through a long story that you can read in Crazy Brave or Poet Warrior, I wound up at the University of New Mexico. And this was about that time, you know, being involved in Native rights movements. A lot of my poetry, I started writing poetry at the University of New Mexico, and influenced by being part of the Kiva Club, the Native Student Club at the university. And we were involved in Native rights movements. And because we were university students, and a lot of us, the first generation, our people had a lot of respect for us. And so in the surrounding Native communities, if they were having meetings with the coal companies and uranium companies, they would ask the students to come and be there for them and to listen and to help. And that's where my poetry started, listening to those kinds of speeches and realizing that, I mean, healing has always motivated me, and so has justice. And hearing those speeches, people speaking for the land. In essence, that's what those speeches were. Like, we are part of this place. Our genealogy includes the land. So that inspired me. And yet there we were, I think going towards harmonic or a harmony relationship with earth and with ourselves ultimately. And the earth, of course, Iganajaga is ourselves. It's not always pretty, and it can be violent and intense. To confront yourself can be a very intense process. And again, it's not easy at all. I'm sure everyone in here can testify to that. So this is called An American Sunrise, with a guitar solo by Rich Robinson of the Black Crowes. We were running out of breath as we ran to meet ourselves. We were surfacing the edge of our ancestors' fights and ready to strike. It was difficult to lose days in the Indian bar if you were straight. Easy if you played pool and drank to remember, to forget. We made plans to be professional, and some of us could sing. Bebop da bop, bebop da bop, bebop da bop, bop ba, bop ba, bop ba. We drove to the edge of the mountains with a drum. We made sense of our beautiful, crazed lives under the starry stars. We learned the devil from the Christians, we sang. We were the heathens, but needed to be saved from them. Thin chance. We knew we were all related in this story. A little gin will clarify the dark and make us all feel like dancing. Make us feel like dancing, make us feel like dancing. Bee-ba, 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 dee-ba, bee-ba, dee-ba, ba. To do with the origin of blues and jazz. I argued with the music as I filled the jukebox with dimes in June. 40 years later, and we still want justice. 40 years later, and we still want justice. We are still America. Way-ah, hey-ah, hey-ah, oh. Way-ah, Okay. Let's see. I'm going to stick this little poem in here. I hadn't planned on reading it. But it's called For Those Who Would Govern. With all these elections and people getting elected who have no experience, I was thinking, why don't, and that goes for everything from national to state to even our tribal governments, city governments. we don't really have any test. I'm thinking, what kind of test will we give people? One, running for senator or, representatives. One, do you know civics, history, basic history, American world history, the history of your community? And what about community involvement? Shouldn't that be part of it? Involvement in your community that shows that you have a stake in it. And what about compassion? For those who would govern, first question, can you first govern yourself? Second question, I keep hitting that. What is the state of your own household? Third question, do you have a proven record of community service and compassionate acts? Fourth question, do you know the history and laws of your principalities? Fifth question, do you follow sound principles, then twine your heart and mind together? Go forth to look for fresh vision, to lift up all the inhabitants of the land. Sixth question, are you owned by lawyers, bankers, insurance agents, lobbyists, or other politicians, anyone else who would unfairly profit by your decisions? Seventh question, do you have authority by the keepers of the lands, those who obey natural law and are in service of the lands on which you stand? I'm going to do this little, I think it's a reggae tune I settled down. It's called I Pray for My Enemies. So, let me pull this up. And I know the poem, and I was going to write it out instead. Okay. Again, I'll put the music on and find it. Okay, here it is. Go ahead and move around. This morning, I pray for my enemies. And whom do I call my enemy? An enemy must be worthy of engagement. I turn in the direction of the sun and keep walking. It's the heart that asks the question, not my furious mind. The heart is the smaller cousin of the sun. It sees and knows everything. It hears the gnashing, even as it hears the blessing. The door to the mind should only open from the heart. An enemy who gets in risks the danger of becoming a friend. Yeah, I remember now, that track ends short. Okay. Let's see. See, what happened is I had an order. Yeah. There is an order. This is called How Love Blows Through the Trees. And this came about during the pandemic. Everything shut down, and I remember looking out, and the whole world seemed to have gone into a restoration phase, including us. As to what we learned from it, I'm beginning to wonder if we learned anything. And I was looking out, I was living in Tulsa then, and this came to me. This Oak Creek town appears empty except for the trees. And the story of how wind will come to clean the earth, of the takers who took and never give back. One day, my grandfather used to sing, a fresh world will rise up to take the place of a society that didn't love the earth. We lost ourselves when we crossed that river. Grandfather used to say he would smoke to the east, northwest, and south, touch the earth. He'd be standing in the kitchen, there'd be no one listening. Pass this love on, he'd say. It knows how to bend, it will never break. It's the only thing with a give and take. The more it's used, the more it makes. Grandfather flew like smoke to the sky side of earth. He left us here in this place he blessed. What stories he carried, what laughter wrapped memory. Now I'm standing in the kitchen and I can hear him singing. Pass this love on, he'd say. It knows how to bend, it will never break. It's the only thing with a give and take. The more it's used, the more it makes. That love is a bridge that will cross the river home. He'd be standing in the dark, there'd be no one listening. How love blows steadily through the city. How love blows steadily through the trees. pass this love on. It knows how to bend. It will never break. Okay. So I eventually moved home. I've lived in a lot of places. And even Hawaii, where I raced outrigger canoes. And, but I came home, and I came home to help my mother. I realized I helped midwife my mother. And maybe I should read that poem. I think I'll read that poem. I hadn't planned to read it, but I'm going to read that poem, and then I will play this song. It's called Washing My Mother's Body. And writing that poem taught me something. I wrote that poem when I was in the middle of writing An American Sunrise, which is a book that came out of, I accepted a job at University of Tennessee, Knoxville, a chair of excellence, and went back. And we were in our homelands. Our condo was right above the Tennessee River, looking down into Knoxville. And our condo was right where my grandfather, 5 generations, I realized 5 generations back, Manahui, had stood with his warriors and looked over the town, looking for the best horses they were going to go after, because those were still like Muscogee lands. And so we went all over that country and found houses. I found a house that belonged in Columbus, Georgia, that belonged to my great-great-great-great-uncle, who had one of the largest horse racing establishments on the eastern seaboard. He had quite a business going there and had a lot of houses, which was also something when the Trail of Tears, those are the kind of things they wanted. It wasn't, a lot of people have this image, one, that it's just the Cherokees on the Trail of Tears, and we were basically leaving kind of squalid conditions for more squalid conditions. It was not like that at all. We had houses they wanted, we had lands they wanted, and we had businesses. You don't think about that, businesses they wanted. And so to see his house, one of his houses there, that was Patty Carr's house. It was like, wow. There's a lot more to this story. And so I was busy, I started dealing with this great conflict, or paradox, you might call it. It's like our families, we both know our lines of Muscogee families very well, and both our families had fought, against removal, and here we were excited that we were going to go home back to Oklahoma. And what do you do with that? Because all of our story roots were there. At the Chattahoochee River we went to the place where the tie snake lived. I mean, all the story roots were all back there. And yet our people weren't there. They'd either been killed or run out. And we were most of us living in the Creek Nation, Muscogee Nation in Oklahoma. What do you do with that? They fought, and here we were there, and the land was beautiful, and it was painful to see that part of the story. And so that's how my book, An American Sunrise, I was writing through that story. So in the middle of dealing with Muscogee history and Manahui and all of that, this poem came out. And of course, that's my mom. She's always present. And it came because when my mother passed, we were with her, my sister and I were with her. And so I stayed in the room singing, and I wanted to wash her body. I never washed, but I knew that's what needed to be done. So I'm in there, and next thing I know, these men in suits come into the house to take her. And I started to argue with my sister, and then I thought, no, just like birth, death, it creates a very tender, tender place. So just like with birth, or you have a mother carrying a child, everyone needs to be careful about what's said and how you act, because that affects the child. The child is malleable, the forming child, and the same with someone going to the other side. Don't be arguing over someone when you think they can hear. You need to be tender. Sing to them. We were singing to my sister-in-law. They had the TV on in there and everything. I went in and turned the TV off, and I just started singing to her. They need that. And so I didn't argue. I thought, no, I won't argue. But I wound up a few years later writing Washing My Mother's Body in a poem. Washing my mother's body. I never got to wash my mother's body when she died. And the poem taught me that if there's things you haven't done, things you wanted to say, but you don't know where the person is, or they've passed on, or you can do it in a poem. I see poems as kind of rituals, where you come into the poem, there's the doorway, the title, and each line takes you on part of a journey. And then when you step out, you're renewed, changed, even disturbed, depending on the poem. But you've gone through a kind of ceremony with it. Washing my mother's body. I never got to wash my mother's body when she died. I returned to take care of her in memory. That's how I make peace. When things are left undone, I go back and open the door. I step in to make my ritual, to do what should have been done, what needs to be fixed so my spirit can move on, so that the children and grandchildren are not caught in a knot of regret they do not understand. I find the white enamel pan she used to bathe us when we were babies. I turn the faucet on and hold my hand under the water until it is warm, the temperature one uses to wash an infant. I find a clean washcloth in a stack of washcloths. She had nothing in her childhood. She made sure she had plenty of everything when she grew up and made her own life. Her closets were full of pretty dresses, so many she had not the time to wear them all. They were bought by the young girl who wore the same flour sack dress to school every day, the one she had to wash out every night and hang up to dry near the wood stove. I picked up the bar of soap from her sink, the same soap she used yesterday morning to wash her face. When she looked in the mirror, did she know it would be her last sunrise? I move over pill bottles, a clock radio on the table by the bed, a pen, and set down the pen. I straighten the blankets over her to keep her warm for dignity. I start with her face. Her face is unlined even 2 months before her 80th birthday. She was known for her beauty, and when younger, passed for Cherokee. My mother kept the iron pot given to her by my mother, whose mother said it was given to her by the U.S. government on the Trail of Tears. She grew flowers in it. As I wash my mother's face, I tell her how beautiful she is, how brave, how her beauty and bravery live on in her grandchildren. Her face is relaxed, peaceful. Her earth memory body has not left yet. But when I see her the next day embalmed and in the casket in the funeral home, it will be gone. Where does it go? It is heavier than the spirit who lifted up and flew. I think of making the rounds to every place it is loved to say goodbye. Goodbye to the house where I brought my babies home. She sings goodbye to June's bar where I was the shuffleboard queen. I cannot say goodbye yet. I will never say goodbye. I lift up each arm to wash. Her hands still wear her favorite rings. She loved her body and decorated it with shiny jewelry, with creams and makeup. I am tender over that burn scar on her arm from when she cooked at the place with the cruel boss who insisted she reach her hand into the friolator to clean it. She had protested it was still hot and suffered a deep burn. That scar always reminded me of her coming in from working long hours in restaurants, her uniform drenched with sweat, determination, and exhaustion. Once she came home and I was burning up with a fever. She pulled out the same pan I am dipping the washcloth in now. only she's added rubbing alcohol to bring the fever down. She washes tenderly, tells me how her friend Chunky left her husband again, how she knows her old boss, a Jewish woman who always treated her kindly, has cancer. She doesn't know how she knows, she just knows. She doesn't tell me that. I find it in a journal she has left me, a daybook in which she has written notes for me to find when she is gone. I wash her neck, lift the blankets to move down to her heart. I thank her body for carrying us through the rough story, through the violence of my father and her second husband. The story is all there in her body as I wash her to prepare her to be let down into earth and return all stories to the earth. My body memories rise up as I wash. I recall carrying my 2 children, rocking them and feeding them from my body, how I knew myself as beloved earth in that body. I uncover my mother's legs. I remember the varicose veins that swelled like rivers when my mother would get off a long shift of standing and cooking. They carried more than a woman should carry. A woman should be honored like a queen. Traditionally, we treated our women with that kind of respect, my Creek husband tells me. Ha, I laugh and ask him, then why aren't you cooking my dinner? I wash her feet, caress them. You will have some rest now, I tell my mother, even as I know my mother was never one for resting. I make the final ring of the washcloth and drape it over the pan. I brush my mother's hair and kiss her forehead. I ask the keepers of the journey to make sure her travel is safe and sure. I ask the angels whom she loved and with whom she spoke frequently to take her home. But wait, not before I find her favorite perfume. She loved perfume. Then I sing her favorite song softly. I don't know the name of the song. It's just a few phrases. One of those old homemade heartbreak songs where there's a moment of happiness wound through. And then I let her go. Let's see. I'll do this song and then read a couple more, and then we're going to do a Q&A. So I did move home after all these years. I thought about it like during the summer, during our ceremonies season. I thought, well, I'll just get a little house and move back in the summer because I lived in New Mexico mostly for years, Hawaii for several years. And then my mother passed October, and at the end of November, I had moved back. And I bought the house that my sister had been living in a small community south of Tulsa called Glenpool. And it's all that area is Creek community, Muscogee community. So people would come to the door and hang out. And there I was with my life with deadlines. So one day, I'm working on a deadline I like to write at the kitchen table. I've had all kinds of desks. And when I had the job at UTK, it's the first time in a job that they ever gave me money for furniture. And I was looking at desks and I wasn't getting excited about any of them. Instead, I brought a big kitchen table for my desk, and the students loved that. Anyway, so I'm working, and I hear somebody at the door, and I look out the little peephole, and it's my friend's cousin. Call it my cousin's cousin, so they were probably my cousin, standing there, and he looked like he was a little hungover, and he had several bags around him. And I thought, oh, no. So this is a story about what happened. It's called One Day There Will Be Horses. Stood at my door, peered out from the wreck of a 3-day drunk. Your eyes say good man works with hands and wants a chance. You wanted a ride to the other side of town. No way to walk the bridge bridge over Pocock Creek. One day I will be rich enough. One day I will be lucky enough. One day I will have horses. Talked about relationships, jobs, and all the winners. You laughed and we kicked back in the sun. You asked me to let you off near the overpass north of town. A creek ran parallel to the highway. There were trees bending down to cup the wind. One day I will be rich enough. One day I will be lucky enough. One day I will have horses. When I look back, you were walking west, work shoes and tools over your shoulder. A little rain began to fall from sparse, lucky clouds. Did you find a place to sleep? You light the dark as you sing your traveling song. Hey ya, hey ya, oh, hey ya, hey ya. One day I will be lucky enough. I'm going to read, I'll end with remember, but I want to read this little section from Catching the Light. It was a dream I had. I was working on my memoir, Poet Warrior, and it was the pandemic. About half the people that I knew, half of the artists of all sorts, freaked out and just watched Netflix the whole time. And others, like me, I finished 2 anthologies, wrote a memoir and a new album of music, I Pray for My Enemies. And this Catching the Light, too. This was a book from there's that big Wyndham Campbell Prize, and they ask for someone to give a lecture, and then they have you turn it into a book. So I wrote little pieces and strung them all together. But this dream was like one of those, there's all kinds of dreams. Some of them are, I ate too much pizza and drank beer last night dreams. Others are anxiety dreams, and some are where you actually go places and meet people in time, sometimes in time. There's a place I go to sometimes meet people who've passed on. It's a certain table we meet at. And this one was one of those dreams, and I knew after I had it that it actually happened, because there's no time in that kind of place, in the dream place. So it had already happened, it will happen, and it was happening. And I got to see my 7th generation granddaughter. One dream came to me as I was near the end of story making for the memoir. It was one of those dreams that stands apart because it carries light. I saw myself standing at the doorway of time. I was holding a child of the 7th generation in my arms. I adjusted the blanket to see her face, to see what this one was bringing with her to share. It is in this manner that I have taken every child, grandchild, and great-grandchild into my arms to welcome them, to bless them during my time walking on the earth. I smiled at this girl who looked at me with her eyes that shined from the memory of the place she was coming from, and with hope for the story that she would make here. I thought first, she looks Japanese. I told her, you look like my daughter Rainey, your sixth great-grandmother. I sang into the baby a song that would give her strength and sustenance, a song that would call her ancestors to stand behind her no matter the trials, no matter history and heartbreak. Then I walked with her into time and delivered the baby to the earth story that needed her. Somebody always accompanies each child born into this earthly realm. So I thank you. I'll close with this poem, and I probably won't stand here and turn the pages. This just came out from Random House Children's Books, Remember, with art by Michaela Goad. And I'll show you a few, and then I'll just read the poem. Let's see. Paul Gordon read this one section about I was going to show you that one. Oh, well. This one's on This Universe is You. I like how in the whole book there's always this circle that shows humans and plants and animals and the water and the earth and the sky as one circular kind of being. And one of my favorites, this was the one Paul Gordon read. Remember the plants, trees, animal life. So I'll read the poem, and then we're going to do a Q&A. I don't know that I have many answers. This whole journey is really about the questions that we all have. I'm not trying to discourage you. It's interesting, this poem is even now on a spacecraft, Lucy, hurtling through space, and it's got quite a journey that it's made on its own. People have wanted to make movies about it. There's all kinds of projects in the work. But, and it's one of my earliest poems. Whoops. Uh-oh. I guess I have music for that too. I actually do have music for this, but I'm just going to read it. Actually, I'm not going to do music, but I'm going to do some of it in Muscogee language. Remember the sky you were born under. Know each of the stars' stories. Remember the moon, know who she is. Remember the sun's birth at dawn. That is the strongest point of time. Remember sundown and the giving away tonight. Remember your birth, how your mother struggled to give you form and breath. You are evidence of her life and her mother's and hers. Remember your father. He is your life also. Remember the earth whose skin you are, red earth, black earth, yellow earth, white earth, brown earth, we are earth. Remember the plants, trees, animal life who all have their tribes, their families, their histories too. Talk to them, listen to them. They are alive poems. Remember the wind, remember her voice. She knows the origin of this universe. Remember you are all people and all people are you. Remember you are this universe and this universe is you. Remember, all is in motion, is growing as you. Remember. Ahozigat agatlejaba sadaleja, chahechkadis, kolaswa amon, kojichamba, im onagaji keithless. Ahozigat agatlejabas, heathlessy, agalejat, keithless. Ahozigat agatlejabas, Hadhayakasi, Hedgekis, Mohasi, Ogara, Yakchidos, Hozigat, Agalejabet, Haksalaki, Neathly, Ogara, Emis, Hozigat, Agatlejabas, Egana, in Hithpi, Omichkis, Egan Chari, Egan Lusty, Egan Lani, Egan Hutki, Egan Oaklani, Eganat, Po mi omis. Thank you. Okay, Q&A, and maybe we can see the audience now. The light's up a little. There you are.
Joy, thank you so very much for blessing us with that transcendent performance. What an absolute gift this has been. Why don't we situate you here on the carpet, and I'll just kind of flank you to the side here. And I don't know if you've experienced this before, but at the Jackson Hole Center for the Arts, they have the coolest way of curating a Q&A. They've got this talk box that they will chuck out to the audience, and they can just sort of batten it around question after question. And maybe if we've got some hands up, I know Marty will toss it out to a brave and intrepid soul who wants to embolden themselves to ask the first question. And as that's happening, any hands, questions? None whatsoever.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, here's a brave soul. And as that's getting tossed down, I will just mention that the Wonder Fest that Paul Gordon Chandler referenced is happening all this weekend, Saturday at 10 o'clock on the St. John's campus, out on the lawn underneath the sort of Revival Vibes tent. You can catch Joy reading with Jacques Black, an amazing poet who born and raised on the Wind River Reservation. We're having a panel discussion with 3 poets from Cave Canem, America's oldest Black literary arts organization, and then a reading with our 2 Starshine and Clay Fellows for Emerging Black Poets with guest judge Roger Reeves, who just won the Griffin Prize very recently. So come one, come all. It's all free and open to the public. Shameless self-promotion. Okay. On with the cube.
Thank you, Travis. Should I do a quick demo if you've not used the catch box? So right up here on top, microphone, and all you got to do is toss it. Leah, did I see your hand up?
Whoa.
Thanks, Marty. Thank you, Joy, for sharing your work. You just said that life's about the questions and not the answers. What questions are you currently grappling with?
Probably the same ones everybody else is. Where is this going? You know, really, I mean, the earth, I mean, I see they're all our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, and so I'm grappling with the same questions, like, what is the legacy? What is our legacy? What do they have to do? You know, how do we best prepare them? What are they carrying? I mean, I'm convinced every generation comes in. Every generation is a kind of person. And that generation comes in at the story together, and certainly solo with a family and with their tribal nation or the land, you know, the country they're in, all of that. But they also come in together as sort of like a generation committee for the next round of the story in the story field to say, okay, where are we taking this? This is our part now, and how are we going to take this forward? So I think about that. I think about that a lot.
The next brave soul. You get to catch the catch box. Oh, there we go.
Whoa, hey. Now throw it to somebody up in the balcony.
I don't know if I have it in me. This makes me kind of uncomfortable to admit, but you did a poem about dreaming. If I have dreams and then something happens that I dreamt about, what is that? What do I do with that? How do I deal with that?
Yes, that's a good question and a dilemma. And because then you wonder, why was I given it if I can't do anything about it? I don't know that I have an answer. I dreamed a missing and murdered woman. I can describe where she is, and I saw the person who did it in a red truck and all, but I have no idea where it is. Like, I don't know where on a map or anything. And I said, why are you giving me this if I don't know what it is? So I don't know, sometimes people dream like, there were a lot of 9/11 dreams and that kind of thing. Sometimes they're, I guess, I'm just thinking, to help prepare you. But, I would ask my spirit too, it's like, okay, don't give me dreams if I can't do anything about them. That's one way to handle it, because they will listen. Or say, if you give me a dream that, is about something, give me something I can do something about.
Yeah.
That's one way to handle it.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else?
All right, thank you. So I teach high school down south of here a little ways, history and government, and I feel like there's so much wonderful indigenous wisdom that we need to take hold of right now. So what is one piece, like if you could give us one piece of wisdom or one piece that I could pass on to my students, what would you share tonight?
I think you've seen a lot of it. I mean, there's a lot in the images, in the quotes that were given by Paul Gordon early on with Black Elk and so on. I mean, I would say what people are in the area, what people are in the area. There's a lot of Native poets, writers, artists, and so on. I would pull from that, but especially from people from the area where you're teaching. Uh-huh.
There's got to be one in the upper decks.
Yeah.
There is one. We got one.
I don't have an arm like that.
Who can make it happen? Can we have like a cutoff person and? You want to shout it out?
I can just shout it out.
Okay.
So do you have any advice or words of wisdom for balancing so many different projects, from albums to children's books to poetry?
I don't know, because it's kind of hit a wreck. Yeah. No, I guess what I do is, I'm always feeling like I don't have enough time. Because I'm also a matriarch. I have a lot of family. I've acquired children. People ask me how many children I have, and I can't remember. Because we got grandchildren. They keep growing. And I love this. I was we had a wedding reception for a daughter, a stepdaughter, but a daughter. And one of her half-sisters came with her daughter, and her daughter asked if I could be her grandmother. And I said, I'm honored. That's one of the most honorable titles. But I don't know. I guess what I do is focus. Like right now, I'm trying not to travel so much because, and then I'll focus on a project for a while and get it to a certain place. A lot of it is just focusing. Like with the memoir, I had notes. I would write notes on it for a while, and then when the pandemic came, I didn't have to travel. So I was writing away. And actually, the Atlantic Center for the Arts down in New Smyrna Beach, they're wonderful, let me come down there for a week. So I know women artists, and some male artists know this, is sometimes you become very good at procrastination, and you get a really clean house, and you're baking all the stuff, so it's good to get away so you can get something done. And but I don't know, I just kind of focus and work on things. I'm not one of these people like Joyce Carol Oates who can sit, at her desk and write for 6 hours, or she does it every day, and I'm not that kind of person. So I have my own way of doing it. Like right now I have a musical play, and I'm kind of working on songs. I'm going to do, I have another album in the works. So what I do is I make them related. Say I have a letter to write, and I have a poem due somewhere, I put them together. I do a lot of that. I try to make the projects, work them together.
I'm curious, just to follow up on that, do you have particular habits and routines around how you work, certain times a day? Or? Very
bad habits, no. No, if I don't have a lot going on, and with a big family, and that's true for a lot of women who create, who have family, and who aren't, they're not like Georgia O'Keeffe, who, made her own space and didn't have children. But when you've got a big family, it's, what was your question again? I'm getting lost.
Oh, it's just
There's so many
habits
family
or
here.
routines or discipline.
When I can, what I like to do is to get up when I'm not totally in this place yet, when I'm still in that space, and just write. That's when it's best, because I don't have any of those walls up yet. I don't have the clatter of 8 a.m. and all, I'm just in that space. And then I let that go. I write for a few hours, and then later on I come and pick it back up. Usually I work on music in the afternoon, or sometimes at night. But that's what I like to do. But then I started writing. I have a book due of letters for I'm not sure, it's for young people, but I was gearing it towards young women poets, I'm not sure. But I have a granddaughter who's 10 I've got in mind for this, to write these like little letters about everything from love, sex, death, I was writing one about openings and prayer and the power of, just different. I'll see where it goes. But I have deadlines are good, somebody asked. Deadlines are really good for that kind of thing. But, and some things take a long time. My first memoir took 14 years, not because I was writing on it every day, because I wrote 3 different versions. And none of them were working right. I mean, the third one was even accepted by the publisher, my editor, and I realized it didn't feel right to me. So I took it apart and I sent to her, and she says, "Oh my God, what did you do?" And then I found it though, and it became Crazy Brave. Yeah.
It's beautiful. I think we had another one, in the back here.
Thank you so much for your time tonight. I think I learned so much. And my question is, you had mentioned women and mothers and daughters and grandmothers, and I think of my own daughter in this setting tonight. She's entering adulthood and is feeling so conflicted, as maybe we all do at that age. But I wonder if you have a challenge in your life that perhaps taught you so much. We share with our children, it's the challenges in life that can teach you so much. And so I wonder, from the wisdom you've shared with us tonight, if there's a challenge in your own life that you may share with us that has taught you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh man, it's all in Crazy Brave and Poet Warrior. I write about those challenges. There's a moment, and I really battled with how to write it in Poet Warrior, because it's difficult to write about things that happen. Some people would say imagination, but it's the story field, and the story field has many frequencies. You know that now. A lot of you sitting here thinking about what you're going to do. There's all these frequencies that we run on. And this was one of those times when I felt it. I call it the council. We all have guardians and so on. And I thought, how in the world do I write about this so that I don't seem crazy? I'm really putting myself out there. But when you get to be 72, you don't care. Really, you've earned, and it's not about me when I'm writing. I'm thinking about those kids. And I was thinking it was about a time in my life that I was sitting outside. I had wound up in Arizona, far away. It was one of those periods where I was conflicted. I had my kids with me. They were young. And I was in Arizona, and I love the desert. And of course, I think about how often to better know themselves, people go to the desert. There I was in the desert, and one night, and I don't know how to explain it, and I kind of worked around it, is that what I call the council. It's like we all have a circle of advisors. I would say on the other side, but it's this side, some of them. And they said, well, it's time to go to like the next level or whatever you want to call it. And, it's sort of like the fairy godmother coming to you and you say to develop and you say no. Well, I said no. I said, no, I want to have fun. Yeah. And I said, well, and I am so embarrassed. It's like, oh my God, I was being offered, okay, it's the next time we're going to be here for you, and it's next time to continue developing. Poetry is writing poetry, being an artist is spiritual development, learning how to fix cars is spiritual development, teaching, all of it All of it is. The janitor who's going to clean up in here after, please pick everything up, is working on spiritual development. And, you know, we all do in whatever we do. But I said, no, I want to have fun. So in Poet Warrior, I talk about, well, yeah, I had, you know, all my life, I was kind of going over this thing, you know, like all of my life, you know, I had to take care of my brothers, my sisters. From the time I was 8, I would be left with the little kids. And then there I was with a teenage mother, and I had these kids, and nobody was helping me. And so I was at a period where I just, you know, I wanted to have fun. And I took care of everybody, but then 7 years later, I realized I had come back to the desert, and I said yes. And I didn't realize that I was writing that the yes, but then there's that 7 years, so I turned it into kind of a poem. And then I had to find a way so that it didn't take over the whole, that wouldn't take over the whole book, because that's not what I wanted to write about. But you can see where it would. Okay, here's the 7 horrible things 7 years of horrible stuff that happened. And it wasn't all horrible. And then I said yes, but I didn't want it to be that book, so I had to wrestle with that part for a while. And, but yeah, there's challenges. I mean, I think that's where literature comes in. It would be really good for your daughter, is that, you know, there is no, if you think about it, there is no story. We would listen to, if there is no challenge in a story, we're not going to listen to it. You know, and the characters in your family, the ones that the most stories are told about are the ones you remember. You know, the crazy stuff, you know.
I wonder, is there one more burning question out there? Maybe 2 more, and then we can conclude.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, thank you for your inspiring words tonight. I guess the question on my mind is, perhaps not you, but some of us often come into a problem of a writer's block where we don't feel we really can go any further. Do you have any special way that you address that issue if it ever happens to you?
Yeah, I guess what I think of it as just part of the process, and if there's a block, if I get stuck somewhere, it either means that I'm going in the wrong direction, and I've tore up pages, I guess, and restarted. But sometimes it takes me a while. I'll put it away and then work on another project. But yeah, I'll put it, it's either I'm going in the wrong direction, or there's something I need to know before I go further, or it's, or I put it away for a while. And that's usually, for me, I just find a way, you know, sometimes it's not ready. Sometimes you're not ready to write it. And sometimes it's good for there just to go read something else, go out and do something that, research. A lot of people don't know that poets are researchers also. We do a lot of research on what we, while we're writing. So that's what I do. So I don't really call it a writer's block. I just call it, well, that's part of the process. And I had one poem, I remember years ago, I worked on one poem all summer. And what was the word? It wasn't the word gravity, but it was a word that was like gravity. And I realized that the poem had no point of gravity in it. But I had a whole folder about that thick, and I never finished it. And sometimes it's like that. And other things you come back to. So you just keep all those pages in folders. But I like what Rita Dove says she does, is lays all of her notebooks out. And sometimes if you go through those, you find something that sparks where you need to go. Oh.
It's beautiful. I think there's one last question over here. It's quite a throw.
Oh.
It's been so touching to hear you reflect on the generations going forward from yourself. And sometimes when I pass in front of a mirror, I see one of my great-grandmothers who I think that I resemble, and I wonder if you have a particular ancestor that you identify with particularly.
Yes, I do, and she's all in Poet Warrior, my Aunt Lois Harjo. So then when I met one of my uncles for the first time and came walking into his home, he says, there, you're her. She was Lois, she was a painter. I have one of her paintings. And she took over, my grandmother died of tuberculosis and my father was young. So she kind of took over. And she knew a lot culturally, and she was, she's that person. But what I've learned too is that nobody ever dies. I mean, I was a young mother, and we have young generations in my family, and so when you get to the point where you have great-grandchildren and you watch all the nieces and everything, you realize, oh my God, nobody ever dies. All their bad habits too are reborn again. It's like you've got to, it all comes, nobody dies, nothing. There it is again. And then you watch patterns happen. I've watched this two-brother thing happen from back to my mother's, from my mother's brothers, two of her brothers there, and saw how that pattern is in my brothers. And then I have my son and his half-brother, very similar, the same characteristics. And I have two grandsons and two great-grandsons, that same pattern. It's just interesting. You realize that there is a larger, you start seeing this whole ancestral thing as, it continues. Not just here in this frequency, I would call it, or in this resonance, but all the way back, which can be overwhelming. I mean, you're just you, too, at the same time. But it also, it ultimately connects everyone. When I became U.S. Poet Laureate and did my project, it was a digital mapping of Native poets, contemporary Native poets. And of course, I wanted all of the Native poets, past, present, and future in it, but there's a capacity problem, Everybody has their jobs, and my project was extra, so we settled on 50, 47 turned them in, and so we have now a collection of 47 poets reading poetry and talking about place in the collections, and also a digital map. But then what I wanted to do was show all of the Native poets and then show how we're connected, like, we all know each other. And there's Lucille Clifton, she was a mentor. There's all of these people, and we have all of these, like I was talking with Emmy earlier about Sandra Cisneros, and she and I went to grad school together and made it through, and we're friends. I mean, we have all of these influences, so I thought, and that's what I want to show on the map too, and I'm watching the staff just listen, put their pens down from there, I want to show all these connections, and then you can show how they go all over the world, and it's like, okay. But, but yes, my Aunt Lois Harjo. Thank you.
Well, Joy, we are so grateful for the way Aunt Lois incarnates herself in you, for the brightness of spirit and heart you bring into the world. And you blessed us with so much wisdom with your weaving of the story field. And I just want to remind everyone that Valley Bookstore has a host of Joy's signed books out there. And if there's someone in your life, beloved to you, who you think could benefit from the balm and benediction that is Joy's writing, please pick up a couple copies. And what I'd love to do to end is a practice we have in the church, which is just a little bit of call and response as a way of expressing our gratitude to Joy. So will y'all engage in this with me? Okay, I'll say a few words and just repeat that word back to me. Joy. 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 Thank you, Joy. Go in peace, friends. We'll see you soon.